There we go. You hear that? Okay. So, first of all, we'd like to welcome everyone to the shir. It's great to have you. And unfortunately, we're not sitting under the tree by the lake, but if we close our eyes for a second, we could picture ourselves there, but let's go. Okay, so we're going to be learning Pirkei Avos and two things about Pirkei Avos. I know Jacob knows this already, but a few things about Pirkei Avos that are just worthwhile to mention, before we start, as we start, that it's a Masechta of Mishnayos that somehow made its way into Seder Nezikin, right? So we have Zroim, which deals with the agricultural laws of Eretz Yisrael, Trumas and Maasros, Bikurim, and the like. Mayid deals with Shabbos and Yom Tovim. Nashim deals with, Even HaEzer, Shilas, marriages, and things of that nature. Say the Nezikin deals primarily with the dinim of Ben Adam Lachaverai, whether it's your shore damaging someone else's shore or somebody's, your baseball flew through somebody's window, you crashed into somebody's car. What do we do about that, right? And then there's also Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin deals with, the court system, the Jewish judicial system, how it's supposed to work in the times of the Chazal. And somehow over here also it landed up this Masechta called Masechta Avos, right? Or it's called in English Ethics of the Fathers, which is a question also, why is it called Masechta Avos, right? So there's a few different reasons why it's called Masechta Avos, but just the reason why it's in Seder Nezikin is because I think we mentioned this in the summer, is that we have there's really three areas of our Avodas Hashem. There's Avodas Hashem of Ben Adam Lamakai, between us and God, between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then there's Ben Adam Lachaveiroi, right, between man and his fellow man, right? If you damage somebody else, don't sneeze on the guy next to you in shul, right? But then there's also Ben Adam La'atzmai, a person's midas, and how he has to work on himself, right? So what's very interesting is that this Masechta really talks about all these three things, but there's a huge part of Avodas Hamidos that's discussed over here. And there's a very big kasha that the Mefarshim ask, and that is, if midas are so important and so fundamental for Yiddishkeit and so fundamental in being a person, in being a human being, and being a Yid, so how come the Torah, Hakdosha, doesn't tell us anything about midas? Right? So this kasha is asked by many Mefarshim, and in many different answers that are said. But one of the answers, which is, I think we have to think about a little bit, is that the Torah was given to a mensch. A mensch is a person who's already something. Now, it's true. Chazal tell us, the Medrash says, that Hamar Shabbat Machzir Lemutav, that even if you have a person who's not Shemer Torah mitzvahs properly, but he's engaged in Talmud Torah. He's very, very involved, and he loves learning, and he believes that there's a kedusha, inherent kedusha in the Torah. So that could go a long way, and that is Hamar Shabbat, the light of the Torah, can return him, can bring him back to becoming a good person again, right? So that's in the Torah, but a person also has to be a mensch. And there's a line they say that's brought from the Vilna Gaon, that the whole tafkid, the whole purpose of why a person comes down into this world is to be masak in his midas, right? And that's a big part of what a person's avodah is. And in a lot of the Bali Musar spoke about this at length, that there are halachas that I have to do every day. I have to daven, and I have to wear tefillin, and I wear tzitzis, and I make brachas, and these kinds of things. But at the same time, I also have to make sure that my midas are in check, right? And my midas, it could mean how I view myself, what my role is as a person, my individuality. Then there's also then there's also the mitzvahs of the appropriate ways how I should relate to other people. And then there's also the proper ways how I'm supposed to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And all these three things are all going to be discussed throughout the Masechta. And it's very, very interesting. And we have a lot of Geshmaka stuff that we're going to hopefully discuss. I want us to just jump into it and start right away. Um, I apologize. I'm going to have to jump up to the shelf to grab it. I didn't get it yet, but okay. So the first thing that the Mishnah starts off with is about the Mesiris HaTorah, the way the Torah was transmitted from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Moshe at Har Sinai, and then was passed down from generation to generation. And when we say it's passed down from generation to generation, we mean, based on this Mishnah and based on elsewhere in Chazal, it means that it was passed down from Rebbe to Talmud. Now, it's true that there's a chiyuv for every father to teach his son, and many cases, and in our history we know that the fathers were their children's rebbes. There's definitely a lot of truth to that. But a rebbe is somebody who's not the biological father, but is almost in a sense a spiritual father. And when you have an Adam Gadol that teaches other people, and we get influenced by that person, so then in a certain sense, they may have a din as a rebbe. So Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai. Moshe got the Torah in Har Sinai. We know Moshe was on the mountain for 40 days, and then another 40 days. He went up, got the Luchas Rishonos, which we spoke about on Shavas B'Tammuz, and then he broke the. I'm sorry, he came down on Shavas B'Tammuz and broke the Luchas Rishonos, and then went up for another 40 days and came down on Yom Kippur with the Luchas Shnius. That's Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai. So Sinai is the the concept of Har Sinai is that's where everything comes from. That's where everything started. Not only did everything start from there, hi Moshe, thanks for joining us. Um, not only is it the highest level, but it's the source of where all Torah was given. But the Ramban holds that there's a absolute chiyuv for a person to remember about Har Sinai and not to forget it. It's a big problem, Dr. Ramban, if a person forgets Matan Torah. And the Gemara speaks in Masechta Brachas in the third parak. The Gemara says that when a person learns Torah, it should be the same way that it was by Har Sinai, Kin Sinasa, like the way the Torah was given. Just like the Torah was given be'ema, be'yira, be'resus, be'ziyah, that the Torah was given with fear and trembling and all these um, graphic descriptions, all these great descriptions, so too, when a person learns Torah, a person should learn B'kedusha, a person should learn with excitement, a person should learn with enjoyment, and that's because that's what Torah is, and that's what we go back to. So Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai, Moshe got the Torah from Sinai. Masar Yeshua, Yeshua was his Talmud Muvak. Whenever we want to show the prototype of what a Rebbe and the Talmud is in Chazal, we always point to Yeshua ben Nun, right? It's very interesting. It's very possible that there were people who were bigger Talmidei Chachamim than Yeshua ben Nun in the Talmidim of Moshe Rabbeinu. But the one who was most devoted and the one that was most dedicated to Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah was Yeshua ben Nun. How do we know this? Because the Medrash tells us that Yeshua ben Nun went out of his way every day to set up the Beis Medrash to make it easier for the Talmidim to come and Hi Moshe, to come and sit down to learn with Moshe Rabbeinu, to learn with everybody. And Chazal see that as a tremendous maila. Chazal see that as a tremendous zchus that he had that pushed him way up and beyond everyone else. And we mentioned once that the Gemara says in Adorim, on Daf Chav Beis, that if Klal Yisrael wouldn't have sinned by the Egel, by the golden calf, after Har Sinai, so then the Ilmale Loi Chatu Yisrael Nitna Lahem Ella Chamisha Chumshei Torah V'Sefer Yeshua Bilvad. It's a very interesting thing. When you learn Chumash ends, with the promises unfulfilled. What do I mean by that? Because the whole Torah, starting from Parshas Lech Lecha, tells us that you're going to get Eretz Yisrael. You're going to get Eretz Yisrael. The Eretz Zavas Chalav Udvash, the land flowing with milk and honey. The land flowing with milk and honey. Yeah, that's very nice, land flowing with milk and honey. When are we going to? Are we there yet? Are we ever going to see it? Is it real? Is it a Baba Maisa? Like, what's it really all about? And then the Torah ends. Parshas V'zei Sabracha. Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. He doesn't go into the land of Israel and neither do the Jewish people, right? I mean, most of the people that left Mitzrayim passed away because of the Meraglim and the other sins that happened when they were in the desert. So the Torah ends on like a little bit of in the middle of the story. The promise wasn't fulfilled. It's like you ended the story before it was over. So the one who finishes up the story, the sequel, so to speak, to the story of the Chumash, is Yeshua ben Nun. And the reason for that is like the Gemara says, is because he's the continuation of Moshe Rabbeinu in the greatest sense possible. Meaning the continuation of what Moshe, meaning if you learn through Sefer Yeshua again and again and again, the psukim say that Yeshua did like Moshe Rabbeinu told him, like Moshe Rabbeinu commanded him, like Hashem told Moshe. Yeshua did like Hashem told Moshe, right? And the reason for that is because he did not deviate one iota, one tiny little bit away from anything that his great Rebbe, our great Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu said. So when we again, the reason why it's important to know this is because the prototype of a Talmud is a dedicated and most devoted Talmud like Yeshua ben Nun. And the Mishnah continues, Yeshua is Zakanim. Yeshua then passes the torch to the Zakanim. Now, if you read the Mishnah, the Zakanim seemingly are anonymous. We don't know who they are. Now, if we take a look in Sefer Yeshua, towards the end, it says the Klal Yisrael. It says that there were Zakanim who took over after Yeshua passed away. Who were those Zakanim? It was Elazar HaKayin, who was the son of Aaron HaKayin, and Pinchas, his grandson. Now, if you look in the Rav, the Bartanura, he explains that the Zakanim were Marich Yamim after Yeshua. They lived after Yeshua already passed away. Yeshua passes away at the ripe old age of 110. Now, really, Chazal say he should have died at the same age as his Rebbe Moshe Rabbeinu at the age of 120. But he had 10 years cut short because he didn't fulfill the command of getting rid of all the seven nations that were living in Eretz Canaan at the time. He didn't do it to the fullest extent, so Mamela, he got punished because of that. Now, the Mishnah over here does not go through the whole sequence of Rebbe to Talmud from Yeshua until this Canaan, but who were this Canaan? So this Canaan were Elazar HaKayin, that's Aaron HaKayin's son, and there's also, who took over after him to the period what's called Shoftim. The book in Tanakh that follows after the Sefer Yeshua is called Shoftim, Judges, which was a list of judges, meaning these people were not necessarily Nevi'im. They were great leaders. They did not have the status of a Jewish king. The first Jewish king was Shaul HaMelech, and followed by David HaMelech, which we spoke about a lot over the summer. It's interesting because there are many Mefarshim and many places in Chazal that point to Yeshua ben Nun as having the status of a king. But the pastus is that he was just a great leader, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, that his leadership qualified for many, many different capacities, or almost anything. The way I said it was based on Shemi Shmuel, that the idea of Yeshua was that he was everything besides for the Kohen Gadol. Meaning he was the Rosh Sanhedrin, and he took care of everything besides for being the Kohen Gadol. So this was the period of Shoftim, which lasted many years. The last of the Shoftim were Eli HaKayin and Shmuel HaNavi. Shmuel HaNavi anointed Shaul HaMelech and David HaMelech. So it's basically from shortly after the period of Yeshua ben Nun and Elazar and Pinchas, down to a little bit before Shaul HaMelech and David. Those are the Zkanim. Uzkanim l'Nevi'im. There was a in-between stage between the Zkanim and the Nevi'im that's not mentioned here, but I believe is mentioned in Avos Reb Nassan. And that is that if you learn Sefer Shmuel, anybody here that learns Sefer Shmuel will help me out over here, is that when Shaul HaMelech was, looking for the donkeys that got lost, right? It says he was looking for the chayzah. He was looking for the seer. He was looking for the roya. He was looking for the seer. It doesn't call him a navi. The pasuk doesn't refer to him as a navi, but the pasuk refers to him as a seer. So after Shmuel HaNavi, so we have Nevi'im Rishonim, and then we have Nevi'im Achrayim. We mentioned this also in the summer. The Nevi'im Rishayim are Yeshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, and Malachim. Malachim is actually a very long, over a very long period of time, till the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So that's, the Beis Hamikdash itself stood for, 410 years. So from when Shlomo built until then, right? So it's a period of more than 400 years. Um, so that's in between the Zakanim and the Nevi'im. And the Nevi'im, so who were the Nevi'im? The Nevi'im were, Shmuel Hanavi, the Chazal referred to Shmuel Hanavi as Reish LaNevi'im, to the first of the Nevi'im. And it's very interesting. The Torah Yisrael, on the bottom of the Mishnah, it says that really after Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, Nevuah was sort of lost. But it wasn't lost in the sense that you couldn't get it back. You had to get the password. And Shmuel Hanavi taught the Olam what the password was, and they were able to get the Nevuah back. Now we know that in our times we don't have Nevuah, but Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, Ubehem, meaning when the Gemara talks about Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, which we're going to see next in the Mishnah, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, they were people that there were Nevi'im amongst the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. So when we say that there's a takana, let's say about our davening, that it was created by Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, remember that there were Nevi'im involved in it. Meaning it wasn't just a bunch of rabbis that got together, a coalition of rabbis that got together and says, okay, listen, let's have some fun and make Jews do funny things for the rest of the time because they have to respect us because, obviously that's not true. There were Nevi'im, so they were hearing directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? And the Nevi'im, so let's talk about Nevi'im for a half a minute. We mentioned this in the summer. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, I believe, and it's also Gemara Megillah, that, if you look at our Tanakh, we know we only have 24 books, right? Now, the Gemara says that there were Nevi'im keflayim kiyaytzim Mitzrayim. When the Jews left Egypt, there were 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, meaning that there were lots and lots more people, right? But there was double that amount, meaning there was 1.2 million Nevi'im that existed throughout this, at certain points in it, maybe collectively, but amongst the history of Klal Yisrael, which is a very interesting thing, because if I ask you to name me Nevi'im, so there's only 48 Nevi'im. The Gemara, Rashi and Megillah counts. Hi, Chaim, see, welcome. Thank you for showing up. The Gemara Megillah counts who all those 48 Nevi'im are, right? So the question is, what's the deal? How do you? There's a huge number difference, a huge gap between the 48 Nevi'im and the 1.2 million. So what's going on? So the Gemara explains the Nevuah shehutzrucha l'daris nichteva. A Nevuah that was necessary for future generations was written down, but a Nevuah that wasn't necessary for future generations wasn't written down. Meaning that Nevuah was an experience of very, very high dveikus b'Hashem, very, very strong dveikus b'Hashem. The Rambam in Perek Zayin and Hilchos Yisrael HaTorah goes through it. We mentioned this in the summer also, about what it's like, what Nevuah is like, right? Don't try this at home type of thing, right? But when Shmuel Hanavi came around, he got them back on that pedestal where they were able to be ready to be Makabel Nevuah, and the Mesiras HaTorah, the transmission of Torah, was passed down from Navi to Navi. The Nevi'im were the Rebbes of Klal Yisrael. They were passed down from Rebbe to Talmud in Nevuah until Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, who were the last of the Nevi'im and were the start of the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. Right? As we said, everyone's familiar with Mordechai HaTzadik, right, from the Purim story. He was part of Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, and he was also a Navi, right? The book of Esther, Megillah Esther, that we know the story of Purim, it's the very, very last book that was added to the Tanakh. And there was the Gemara Megillah and the Zion tells us it was a whole question if they were going to allow it to be part of the books of Tanakh or they weren't going to allow it to be part of the books of Tanakh. It was a big question. And ultimately, it was paskin that we would allow, that the Chachamim would allow it to be added in, right? And it's called Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. And the Gemara explains, the Gemara in Yuma says that zero atara liyashna, because they brought back the old customs the way it's supposed to be. What was that about? That was because Moshe Rabbeinu said Hakel Gadol like Gibor V'Anoira. When Moshe was Mispal, he said Hashem, that is big, that is great, that's mighty, and that's awesome. And Yirmiyah and Daniel, who were future Nevi'im, right, or later Nevi'im. Now, Daniel, it's a big question if he was a Navi or not. It's a big, big machlekes, but that's not tonight's discussion. They didn't say Gibar v'Naira because they saw what the Goyim were doing to the Yidden, so they said, how could you say that Hashem is all powerful? We don't see his strength. So Anshe Knesset Gdela came along and they said absolutely nothing doing. We're not going to do that because the fact that HaKadosh Baruch was able to remain silent when the Shechina is being thrown in the dirt, when Klal Yisrael is being trampled on, so that shows a certain greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we touched on this, Tisha B'Av time. So, what's the point of this Mishnah? The point of this Mishnah is two things: to tell us what the Messiah Satira is, where Chazal come from, what they're based on, who our Rebbeim are, and also there are three things that Anshe Knesset Gdela taught us. Heim Amru Shloisha Dvarim. Now, obviously, they taught us a lot more than three things, but here are three things that are going to keep the Torah alive. It's very, very, very kedai to point out, very worthwhile to mention that the same way we know that the Yidden go into Galus, the Jews get sent into exile if they don't keep the Torah mitzvahs, and the Beis Hamikdash gets destroyed. The Torah, which is the glue that holds Klal Yisrael together, can also also ends up going into Galus together with the Yidden. And as we spoke in the summer, that when the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so the Shechina sort of transitioned from being in a physical building to being amongst Talmidei Chachamim, right? So here are three things that Anshe Knesset Gdela said that if you keep these three things, Torah will stay alive. What are these three things? Heim Amr Shloisha Dvarim. They said three things. What are these three things? Have a mesunim badin. You should be slow to judge. V'hamidu salmidim harbe, and have a lot of talmidim. Right, like right now we have a lot of talmidim. But asus yagla Torah, and you should make a fence around the Torah. So let's go. I want to stop in 4 minutes. I know it's a little early, but I got places to go to, so we're gonna stop in 4 minutes. But let's quickly go through what these three things are. Having Masudim Badin means that if a question comes to you two or three times, don't say, we're talking about a Rav, we're talking about a Rebbe, we're talking about a person who people come to him with questions. Don't say, oh, I know this Shaila already. I heard this question once before. I know the story already. Many times maybe you know the story, but you don't know the person behind the story, or you don't know the background to the story. So it's important to be patient. Masuna means to be patient, but then don't rush to judge. Meaning, many times people could be impatient, and many times people are impatient, and they're not interested, they're not in the mood of going through, you know, the whole questionnaire. Who are you? Who's your mother? What's your mother's maiden name? And where you come from, or where your grandparents come from? People are not necessarily interested in that. They want to psak. They want to answer to the question. So you go through. Be patient with it. Now, if you're the Rav and you treat the person who's coming to you respectfully, meaning that you take him seriously and you treat him with respect, he's going to come back a second time. And he's going to come back a third time till eventually he's going to know what's right and what's wrong on his own because you taught him. So it's a way of preserving a connection between the Rav and the constituents of the Rav. Okay, so that's Masunim Badin. Also because when people rush, many times they make mistakes. Haste makes waste, as one of my rebbeim used to say. V'hamidu samidim harbe. And you should try to get as many people as you can to learn with. Why? What's the importance of this? I mean, obviously it's important to learn with every Yid, right? And every Yid is mechayiv to learn Torah. So what's the significance of this? So the reason is because the Gemara in Brachas tells us a story, which we don't have time for the whole thing, but the Gemara Brachas has a story that Rabban Gamliel only let people into the Bismedrash if they were very serious about learning. Meaning he had a yeshiva l'metzuyanim, he had a yeshiva for the best guys. I mean, and the people that weren't great, they couldn't come. You weren't serious about learning, you couldn't go to yeshiva. You had to be a woodcutter, a wood chopper, right? So this Mishnah is saying not like Rabban Gamliel because we want to have everybody, we want to give everybody equal opportunity to learn. Okay, so many people make a big bismedrash with a lot of chairs and good air conditioning and good lighting and a lot of svarim and make it comfortable. And you know what? Like we said before, maybe even if people are not doing the right thing when they learn Torah, they can be put back on the right track. But asus yagla Torah. What does this mean? You should make it gather. You should make a fence that people should not come to be nichshel in a mitzvah deraisa. Now, there are many, many, many dinim derabanan. Anybody who learns Gemara knows that there's many differences between deraisas and derabanans, right? We're not going to go through a list of them now, but the point is, the pasuk says, "Mishumartem es mishmarti." You should make a mishmeres. You should make a guard, a guardrail. You know, when you're driving on the highway, you have those guardrails on the side that protects the cars from falling off, right? Now, most people are going to be careful when they're driving anyways, or they're not going to fall off. So you don't really need that. But some places you do, right? But what's pshat? I actually saw that there's a guy that's, making a movement to try to put up guardrails all across the United States. And maybe that's why there was traffic on the way to camp every day because they're putting this up. But the point is that we don't, the last thing we want is a person to be nichshal, to do an avera even inadvertently, even by mistake. So we are trying our best to, meaning the Chazal are trying very, very hard to make sure that they're able to protect themselves from staying away from any isurim, and that's the point of dinum derabbanans. Meaning, it's for some people they say, derabbanans, it's not a big deal, right? The point of derabbanans is that you shouldn't be nichshal in any mitzvahs, deraises. Um, and I think with that, we're going to wish you a good evening, and we will continue next week. Um, I know it's a shtickle early, but we said we're going to end around now. Please invite your friends. I don't have everyone's numbers. I was thinking maybe making a WhatsApp group of all the people that are part of this shir. If anybody wants, you could always reach out, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. All right. Take care, everyone. Hatzlacha. Great to spend time with you. Have a good night. Take care. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. It's good to see everyone. Okay, bye-bye. Anybody have any questions before we shut it down?
No.
No. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ushka. Thank you so much.